Since 1945, the United Nations Security Council has passed over 2,500 resolutions, yet wars and conflicts continue to ravage the world, with the global economic cost of violence totaling over $14 trillion in 2020 alone. This staggering figure translates to approximately $1,800 per person worldwide, affecting not just the immediate victims of war but also the global economy, and by extension, your own wallet. The ongoing conflicts in Yemen, Syria, and the Democratic Republic of Congo are stark reminders of the UN Security Council's inability to prevent wars, with the humanitarian crises in these countries resulting in millions of displaced people, thousands of civilian casualties, and widespread human rights abuses. The real-world consequences of the UN Security Council's inaction are dire, with countries like Ukraine and Georgia facing Russian aggression, while Israel and Palestine remain embroiled in a decades-long conflict. The numbers are telling. In 2020, the UN reported over 40 million internally displaced people worldwide, with 25 million refugees fleeing their home countries. For instance, the Syrian civil war has resulted in over 6 million internally displaced people, with 3 million children out of school and 12 million people in need of humanitarian assistance. These numbers represent real people, with lives disrupted, families torn apart, and futures uncertain. To understand why the UN Security Council often fails to prevent wars, it's essential to examine the organization's structure and the interests of its member states. The UN Security Council consists of 15 members, with 5 permanent members: the United States, Russia, China, France, and the United Kingdom holding veto power over any resolution. This veto power has been used numerous times to block actions that could have potentially prevented or mitigated conflicts. For example, Russia has vetoed multiple resolutions on Syria, while the United States has vetoed resolutions related to Israel and Palestine. The use of veto power is often driven by the national interests of the permanent members, rather than a genuine commitment to maintaining international peace and security. The UN Security Council's ineffectiveness is further compounded by the lack of representation from other regions and countries. The current structure of the Security Council, established in 1945, does not reflect the modern global landscape, with countries like India, Brazil, and South Africa having significant economic and military influence. This lack of representation can lead to a disconnect between the Security Council's decisions and the concerns of the broader international community. Furthermore, the dominance of the permanent members can result in a situation where the interests of smaller countries are overlooked or ignored. In recent years, there have been efforts to reform the UN Security Council, including proposals to increase the number of permanent members, limit the use of veto power, and improve representation from underrepresented regions. However, these efforts have been met with resistance from the current permanent members, who are reluctant to relinquish their power and influence. For instance, the United States has expressed concerns about the potential expansion of the Security Council, citing the need to maintain the organization's effectiveness and efficiency. Meanwhile, countries like Germany and Japan have been pushing for reforms, arguing that the current structure is outdated and ineffective. The consequences of the UN Security Council's inaction are far-reaching and have significant implications for global stability and security. The ongoing conflicts in the Middle East, Africa, and Eastern Europe are not only causing immense human suffering, but also contributing to global economic instability and the rise of extremist groups. The refugee crisis, which has been exacerbated by the UN's inability to prevent wars, is placing a significant burden on countries like Greece, Turkey, and Germany, which are struggling to cope with the influx of migrants. Moreover, the failure to address the root causes of conflicts is creating an environment in which terrorism and extremism can thrive. The UN Security Council's inability to prevent wars also has significant implications for the global economy. The cost of conflict is not only measured in human lives, but also in economic terms. The destruction of infrastructure, the disruption of trade, and the loss of productivity all contribute to a significant economic burden. For instance, the Syrian civil war has resulted in estimated economic losses of over $226 billion, while the conflict in Ukraine has resulted in estimated losses of over $100 billion. These economic losses have a ripple effect, impacting not just the countries directly involved in the conflict, but also the global economy as a whole. In conclusion, the UN Security Council's failure to prevent wars is a complex issue, driven by a combination of factors, including the organization's structure, the interests of its member states, and the lack of representation from other regions and countries. To address this issue, it is essential to push for reforms that increase representation, limit the use of veto power, and promote a more inclusive and effective decision-making process. The global community must come together to demand action and to hold the UN Security Council accountable for its failures. The UN Security Council's inaction is not just a distant problem. It has real consequences for your life, your country, and the world's future stability and security. The failure to prevent wars and conflicts is a stark reminder of the need for a more effective and accountable international system, one that can address the complex challenges of the 21st century and promote a more peaceful and prosperous world for all. The international community must recognize the urgency of this issue and work towards creating a more just and equitable world, where the interests of all nations and people are represented and protected.